Do you want me to start, Dan?
Perfect. Let me just real quick go over the agenda first. So briefly, we're going to run through introductions of the RAC and DEQ staff. Then I have two separate presentation components about how the rules are organized, followed by the control technology requirements, thresholds, and more of the specifics on the rule changes. And then we've allotted a relatively large chunk of time from 1:45 to 2:45 or so to hear from specific questions from the RAC, concepts, suggested changes, all that fun stuff. And then the RAC will be able to decide whether they want to have the public provide any input. We've had some time for that, talk about next steps, and then we will adjourn by 3. We'll try to honor this as close as we can to make sure that everybody can get to their next meeting or their next work item as applicable. So with that, yeah, Farrah, go ahead and take over our introductions. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. So first I have some housekeeping items that I would love to go over. So welcome everyone to the third meeting of the Rules Advisory Committee for this upcoming rulemaking affecting gasoline dispensing facilities in the state of Oregon. This rulemaking is primarily focused on updating requirements around vapor recovery controls at designated facilities. My name is Farrah Fatimi, and I use she, her, hers pronouns. I work as an air quality planner at DEQ. I'll be your meeting facilitator today. So yeah, I'll just go over a few more logistical and housekeeping items. For the settings on Teams today, if you are a member of the Rules Advisory Committee or a DEQ staff member and you're on a computer, your settings should allow you access to both camera and microphone. If you are a member of the public, your settings on this meeting will allow you to view the presentation and access your microphone during the designated public input period as applicable. The chat function for all attendees is not available during this particular meeting. For all attendees and committee members, please ensure that your microphone is muted until you have been identified to speak. For those of you attending this meeting by computer, you may raise your hand by clicking on the raise your hand icon in the Teams window. When called upon, please unmute yourself by clicking on the microphone icon in the Teams window. Please remember to mute yourself again once you no longer need the mic, and to also lower your hand when your question has been answered. If you are joining by phone, please raise your hand by pressing *5. Once called in, you can unmute yourself by pressing *6 to begin your comment or question. And once finished with a comment or question, please then press *5 to lower your hand and *6 to mute yourself again. So again, raise or unraise your hand by pressing *5. Mute or unmute yourself by pressing *6 if by phone. For attendees of the general public that are not on the Rules Advisory Committee, a reminder to please hold your questions and input until the designated period. So with that, we will do some more introductions. If I can hear from the rest of DEQ staff, Dan, why don't you kick off with DEQ introductions, and I'll call on the rest of DEQ staff, and then we'll go through the Rulemaking Advisory Committee members as well. If you can share your name, your pronouns, and a brief description of your role, that would be great.
Sure. Thank you, Farrah. My name's Dan DeFair in Oregon DEQ Air Quality Operations Sections. Pronouns are he, him. And I have stepped in from a support role helping Heather Kwapimaki with the rulemaking to being the lead rule writer for this rulemaking. If you did not know that, hello, I am your lead rule writer helping us get this thing to the finish line. So looking forward to hearing what you guys have to say today. Appreciate it.
Right. And then Alex?
Hello, my name is Alex Mantos. I'm a senior environmental engineer with the planning group. Sorry about that. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm excited to be on this RAC meeting. I'll also be taking notes. So for the RAC committee members, if you could share what business you're a part of, I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Right. Any other DEQ staff? We have Michael Orman here.
Hey everybody, Michael Ehrman, Air Quality Planning Manager for DEQ, he, him pronouns. I'll be in and out a little bit today, but I just wanted to make sure and reinforce my appreciation for you all and sticking with us as we continue this rulemaking. Remind you all that your feedback is really needed in order for the rules to be effective, and we value your input. So please speak up and give us your feedback today or even after the RAC meeting in writing. And thanks again to Dan and Farah and Alex for keeping this going, and appreciate that.
Thanks, Michael.
And Farah, we've got one more
And
DEQ
I
where Brandy
believe,
Albertson.
oh, Brandy is on the line. Brandy, would you please introduce yourself?
Hi, my name's Brandy Albertson. I'm with the Air Quality Technical Services. I basically provided the emissions data on the various scenarios and for the GDF facilities statewide. And you can go with what is it? She, her pronouns. Thanks.
Thank you, Brandy. Are there any other DEQ staff members that are here that I am missing? Okay, with that, we will move to the members of the Rulemaking Advisory Committee. Let's start with Dave Painter.
Good afternoon, everyone. Dave Painter, I go by he, him. And I'm a project coordinator working with Barghouse Consulting Engineers. We do permitting and compliance work for Costco fueling facilities.
Thank you. Beth.
Hi, I'm Beth Erickson. I work for Lane Regional Air Protection Agency, and I've been off and on with these meetings and have reviewed what Dan has written for the rules. And I'm he, her, she. Sorry.
Thank you. Omar.
Yeah, good afternoon. Omar Vasquez, also with Barghausen Consulting Engineers, design engineering. Costco's our major client, but a lot of other independent brands as well. He, him.
Thank you. Patty.
Can you hear me? I don't have a, I don't think I have a microphone. If you can hear me, I'm also with Barghouse Consulting Engineers.
Oh, we can hear you. Thank you, Patty.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
And Bascom.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm Bascom Grecian with Ed Staub and Sons Petroleum, and I'm the Government Affairs Manager, and my pronouns would be he, him.
Great, thank you. Let's see. Are there any other members of the Rulemaking Advisory Committee? It looks like Lisa is not able to unmute. Let me see if I can change that really quickly. Dan, do you see anybody else that needs to talk while I work on unmuting Lisa?
I don't think I see any other RAC member names in the list. Except, yeah, it does say Lisa Guest, so that could be Lisa Arkin. Well, to not kill time while you try to figure that out, Farah, just generally, I suppose the purpose of today's meeting is to hear from the RAC regarding the draft rules. We sent a copy of those out last week via email. So we're interested in all the specific comments, general comments, suggested changes, broad feedback. You forgot a period here, comma there, all of the everything you guys might be able to tell us about. We're happy to hear all of it. And everything in between. So that's what we're trying to accomplish today. Hopefully my presentation will get you to a good point where you understand more of what the rules are trying to accomplish, and then we can have a discussion about how we can make sure we get to an endpoint that makes sense.
This is Lisa Arkin. I now have microphone. Hello, Lisa Arkin, she, her pronouns. Beyond Toxics is the organization I represent.
Great, thank you, Lisa. I do see another hand raised. Just see. Tom, can you unmute yourself? Are you representing an organization on the Rulemaking Advisory Committee?
I am Tom Humanhofer, and I'm standing in for Jim Verberg, Western States Petroleum Association.
Great, thank you. All right. I think we have introductions wrapped up. So yeah, Dan, should we go on to the next slide? All right, so your primary rulemaking contact is Dan, as he has been involved in the rulemaking process throughout the time. Dan's contact information is there, and then you can find information on this rulemaking through the link provided as well. So those are your resources. Please feel free to contact us with questions.
Absolutely. So thank you, Farah. Oh, sorry. Do you have anything else?
Nope, that's it.
Perfect. So as you're all probably aware, this is the third RAC meeting. The next steps are shown on this slide, and we'll return to a timeline that shows pretty much something similar towards the end of the presentation with a little bit more detail about next steps. But our point here is to discuss the draft rules, hear your feedback. Then we have a fiscal public notice and presentation to the Environmental Quality Commission, our governing body. So that's kind of what the future looks like for this rulemaking effort. And let's jump into it. Let's get to the meat and potatoes. So this first part of the presentation that I prepared is to give a general overview of how the rules are organized. The Division 244, where these rules are found, it will begin how it has. So in the draft rules, you'll see there's a list of regulations and rules applicable to hazardous air pollutants. It includes all the federal standards that have been adopted by reference. There's a couple minor changes earlier in the division, more formatting, clarifications, periods in between the CFR for Code of Federal Regulations, things like that. Then after that section is all the gasoline dispensing facility rules. They'll continue to be located in that same position. So the beginning of our rules, we have Rule 230. So the OAR citation is Oregon Administrative Rule, Chapter 340 and Division 244. And then the specific rules that we're adjusting are listed in this far left column. So Rule 230 is a gasoline dispensing facility specific definition section. Some of the previous definitions we had in Division 244 were specifically to address gasoline dispensing facility rules, but the way the rule was laid out, those definitions could or should have been used to implement a bunch of other standards that are in Division 244, which was not our intent, was not appropriate. So a rule that specifies the definitions that are to apply to GDF rules was necessary. And then moving down, we have 234, It's the affected equipment and sources rule. It clarifies which equipment and facilities are subject to these rules, generally speaking. And it further explains the difference between the GDF type 1 through 5, which is the new differentiation that we're using to establish which requirements apply to which type of site around the state. And then I guess I'll say the current version of the rules distinguishes between several different factors that can be confusing. It has caused a lot of confusion from DEQ staff to sources that are affected by the rules. It was a lot of cross references, a rule that pointed to another rule that pointed to another rule and going back and forth. So it was facility location, tank capacity, and throughput all were factors that played into what a facility was subject to. So our goal with this change is to clarify which facilities are subject to specific requirements. And then each definition, or I'm sorry, each GDF numbered rule, which is the 237 through 243 you see on your screen, clarifies which other rules in the division apply to that specific station or facility. So as you would move up in the numbers of GDF type, more requirements would apply. And that GDF 3 would comply with GDF 2 and 1 requirements, 4 would comply with 3, 2, and 1, and so on. Okay, and then after these numbered sections, the core of the rule requirements are listed. So they are separated into different rules as shown on this slide. And the biggest changes to these rules are probably in Rule 246, the enhanced vapor recovery, 247, the stage 2 vapor recovery systems, and 249 for testing and monitoring. I would just note about this section, so something that maybe wasn't entirely clear in the previous RAC meetings, Rule 247 that covers stage 2 vapor recovery equipment and those associated requirements were previously found in Division 242, rules specific to the Portland area. And so the proposal is to repeal them entirely from Division 242, plop them into 244 so that all of the gasoline dispensing facility rules are in one division found in the same place of DEQ's rules. And then they also clarify which current stage 2 facilities would need to make changes to their equipment by when, what an owner operator would do if they're electing to remove stage 2 equipment, and what a current stage 2 that is going to keep their equipment under the proposed rules would continue to do. And then there's also the record keeping and reporting towards the end of the division. And
Dan, it looks like we have a question from Dave Painter.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Dave.
So I just I reviewed my emails. You said, Dan, that the rules were sent out to us last week, and I looked. There were a bunch of notifications from DEQ for various rule makings and things, but I didn't find that you'd sent them to us. And so I was going to ask Patty if she had received them.
There is a copy on the rulemaking webpage right now. If you want to grab them from there for now, maybe if Farrah or Alex can navigate to the rulemaking page quickly and put a link into the chat so folks can access that website.
We can. Yes, we can do that,
Okay.
and we'll send them out by email as well.
Yeah, I think I'd like to pay attention to what you're saying rather than chase after those. But yeah, no, I just I'm pretty careful about emails and I don't remember receiving it. But anyway, thank you, folks. Very good, very much.
Okay. Yeah, we'll make sure well, I guess we'll blast another email to everybody on the RAC with a copy. But when in doubt, check the rulemaking page. Those should have been uploaded last week as well. Okay, so this is just a quick example of what the GDF type section would look like. So this is the listing for GDF 3, which was Rule 241. You can see in the blue text at the top, Rule 241. It would tell the owner operator of a GDF 3 they're subject to various requirements. And then you'll see the orange highlight specifies the testing at 249. So if you had a facility that was a GDF 3 or subject to those requirements, you can go read Rule 249, and then in that rule, you'll see which specific test requirements would apply to your facility. And then the same would be with the blue highlights, the next line item for a GDF3. It says comply with Rule 248 for a dual point vapor balance system. And then it specifies new and existing there. And if you go look at 248, it'll specify more specifically, I suppose, what equipment you would have to install to be a complete stage 1 vapor balance system. And another note for this section of the rules, the equipment and specifications for a complete stage 1 vapor balance system were previously an attachment to one of the rules where you would click to open a separate PDF table that listed all these requirements. I've elected to propose in these draft rules that they just live in the body of the rule text themselves. So I think it's just a little bit clearer to not have that component be an attachment, but open to feedback and comment on that change here. And I'll just reiterate, another organizational note was this GDF 1 through 5 being additive, so the 3 subject to 1 and 2. And in each one, you can see it for a GDF 3 here. The first line item is comply with the following requirements is applicable requirements under 238. So 241 is for a 3. And the first requirement here is comply with 238, which is the previous listing that is for a GDF 2. So, yeah, just to make sure that was clear. Okay, so let's transition into the control technology and some more detail on the rule changes in particular. So
Dan, just one quick thing. I just
Sure.
sent out, I resent the email that had the rulemaking in it. So I'm not sure if somehow that ended up in people's junk boxes, but I did see it and I resent it. So you should just be receiving it.
Perfect. Thank you, Farah. Okay, so the first couple slides here, I'll run through the GDF types that are described in the draft rules. So this first listing is GDF 1. It covers a facility that would meet the definition of a GDF, but that only has gasoline storage tanks that are below 250-gallon capacity. So if you're subject to the GDF rules, you have to maintain specific records. You're subject to the work practices to minimize spills, clean them up as expeditiously as possible, etc. But from our current rules, these facilities don't have any substantive changes to their applicable requirements. But they are a GDF subject to the rules, so we need to have them addressed in some capacity. And so those would be GDF type 1. And then moving up the sliding scale here, the GDF type 2 is a facility that has a storage tank with 250-gallon or greater capacity. So it's most facilities that are actively engaged in the selling of gasoline to consumers, and they're required to go back to the stage 1, comply with work practices, comply with the record keeping that was in the GDF 1 listing, but then they also have to comply with the submerged fill requirements for any tanks at or above that capacity threshold. So similar to the GDF 1, these facilities specifically don't have any substantive changes from the current rules. So it's just the submerged fill becomes applicable at this 250-gallon capacity, and that has been a requirement for the last 15 some odd years since these rules were put in place. And then we move towards the 3. So the GDF 3 includes the first substantive changes, I would say, from this rulemaking. So the GDF type 3 is a facility that has 120,000 gallons of gasoline throughput in a 12-month period, which equates to an average of 10,000 gallons per month. So just a quick reminder, GPY on these slides is going to stand for gallons per year. And then year would mean any 12 consecutive month period. So to determine which requirements apply, stakeholders and or DEQ staff would look at January through December throughput, then February through January, March through February, et cetera. So each 12-month period would be a year where you could have something apply. So under DEQ's current rules, these facilities were required to obtain an air permit at the 120,000 gallon threshold, but were only required to install stage 1 vapor balance systems in specific areas of the state. So the change here to require stage 1 vapor balance systems at this consistent throughput level across the state was a recommendation from the RAC at, I think it was the last meeting. So the one consistent threshold for when a complete stage 1 vapor balance system is required removes all the variability of location-based or tank capacity thresholds. So hopefully that's a little bit cleaner of a line to draw for facilities. A new GDF, if you were proposing to build a brand new facility, would need to install a stage 1 system with dual point before that equipment is placed into gasoline service. And then an existing site under these proposed rules that crosses the threshold would be required to install stage 1 controls on any new, replaced, or reconstructed storage tank. And that would also have to be dual point. So this change specifically would result in emissions reductions outside of the AQMAs, the air quality maintenance areas of Portland, Salem, and Medford-Ashland. Outside of these areas, the threshold for installing the stage 1 equipment was 480,000 gallons per year. So this is being reduced to 120,000 gallons per year, and making that change to take uncontrolled sites from 480 down to 120 is expected to reduce statewide VOC emissions by approximately 56 tons per year. Whoa. And you can see a little diagram on the bottom left of your slides here. Just to recall, it says phase 1, that's what I'm calling the stage 1 vapor balance system, where it says phase 2 would be the stage 2 vapor recovery systems. And then we move to the GDF type 4. So this is the site that has 600,000 gallons per year throughput, or about 50,000 gallons per month. So these sites, if they're located in the Tri-County Portland area, we're subject to the requirements to install a stage 2 vapor recovery system at the dispenser level. So the GDF4 has 3 scenarios. There's a newly constructed GDF4 that would install enhanced vapor recovery, EVR, and eco nozzles or enhanced conventional nozzles. Then there's an existing GDF4 without stage 2, so outside of the Portland Tri-County area, that would require enhanced vapor recovery and enhanced conventional nozzles with new, replaced, or reconstructed tanks. And then an existing state GDF4 that is inside the Portland area, currently subject to the stage 2 requirements. They have to determine whether their system that they have installed is compatible or incompatible with onboard vapor recovery. It's the vehicle's vapor capture system. So if the site is compatible with ORVR, that station can decide to keep their stage 2 equipment in place, continue complying with the current stage 2 requirements, or they can elect to remove the stage 2 system and install that enhanced vapor recovery and enhanced conventional nozzles. If that GDF, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I think I saw a question from Lisa Arkin. Lisa, did you have a question?
I'll hold my question so I don't interrupt the slide. Thank you.
Okay.
Sure. The second facility would be this facility that currently has stage 2 equipment that is incompatible with onboard refueling vapor recovery. That's the vac assist systems that have the vacuum motor pulling continually. These sites would decommission and remove their stage 2 equipment and install EVR and eco nozzles by the end of 2024. And based on our fleet estimations and emissions estimates, the end of 2024 was the time at which we see an increase in overall VOC emissions from the incompatible ORVR systems, incompatible with ORVR stage 2 vapor recovery systems. Sorry. So with this change in decreased emissions statewide sources installing this EVR and eco at the 600,000 gallon threshold, we would see a 270 ton per year reduction. And then I'll just note that of the 270 tons of total reduction, 147 tons are from the incompatible stage 2 systems being replaced. And I'll put a note here just for the RAC. One of the substantive goals of the rulemaking was to counteract this increase in VOC emissions from the incompatible stage 2 systems. So just keep that in mind moving forward. Then we'll move to the 5. So a GDF type 5 in these proposed rules is a site anywhere in the state with a throughput of 1 million gallons or more per year. These sites would comply with all the previous requirements, and then there would be a set deadline by which the facility would install the enhanced vapor recovery and enhanced conventional nozzles. So this would ensure emissions reductions occur at all sites across the state with relatively high throughput. And then per the last RAC meeting, using the 1 million gallon per year threshold, reduced the impact to small businesses with only about 25% of those GDFs being operated by small business owners. So this emissions reduction at this threshold would reduce statewide VOC emissions by approximately 292 tons per year. And a note on that one is that is excluding the sites that were already subject to the GDF level, the GDF type 4. So the previous reductions of 270 tons, we have an additional 292 from just this universe of over 600,000 that are, or I'm sorry, just over the 1 million threshold. Okay. So those
Right.
are the types. That's how the rules are organized. And before we jump into the RAC feedback and questions, this is a good chance for you to go ahead, Lisa, with your question.
Thank you very much. Which of those scenarios would cover some of the tanks in the critical energy infrastructure area of Portland? Those big round white tanks.
Big round white tanks. I'm
Along Highway 30 out toward the northeast of Portland along the river.
I don't believe any of these would apply. I think those are terminals, bulk loading terminals that would not be subject to the dispensing. So this is all specific to a facility that is dispensing fuel into like a motor vehicle fuel tank.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And was there a particular rationale for applying the rule to replace stage 2 only for facilities that were going to add new GDFs or replace or reconstruct them? Is there what is the rationale for not requiring it for across the board for those facilities that are, let's say, above a GDF 4 or 5? Did I make myself clear? Sorry.
I think so. So I suppose the main difference would be if you're constructing something new, you have to install right away. And if you're existing, we're just waiting for a tank to need to be replaced to require equipment. And you're asking why we wouldn't just set a deadline to require all facilities to have the equipment by a specific date?
Right. Exactly.
Okay, fair enough. I think the general answer to that is fiscal impact, most likely. We can look a little bit closer at that for the fiscal meeting. But to my understanding, typical implementation of GDF rules generally have been installing equipment at new or replaced or reconstructed thresholds. So definitely open to feedback on that if you think the other way seems to make sense.
Thank you for answering my questions. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Looks like we have another question from Bascom.
Sure.
Yes, hello. So I'm coming in to the third meeting. I did not attend the first 2 meetings, and I wish I had. So these are still in the proposal stage, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Would this apply to state sites as well?
What do you mean by state sites?
Well, for instance, in California, there's actually no stage 2 vapor recovery at any state site. So, like, the state of California has a local highway patrol near where I live, and they have their own fuel tank, but they don't have it. So, in this case, is this all gas stations that fall under those criteria, or is it
Y-
that every site?
Every station, correct.
Okay,
If
so
if they meet the definition of GDF, so if they have storage tanks where they're getting fuel loaded into that storage tank and then they're dispensing that into a motor vehicle. Yeah.
Okay, so and forgive me, I'm coming into the middle of it. When did the dates, the compliance dates, how does that get arrived at?
In the proposed rules, what are
Yeah.
those dates? Yeah, so we have the specific date of the 12/31/2024 is based on when we're estimating this incompatible stage 2 vapor recovery system causing an excess in emissions, net increase in VOC emissions instead of doing the reduction that they're intended to do. So that's how we got to that date. The rest of them were general estimations. So we're looking for feedback from the RAC. We're looking for feedback in the public comment period specifically on these dates. Is it technically feasible? Does it not make any sense, and why? And please educate us.
I would say, oh, that's great. I really appreciate the invitation for that. I would say it's definitely not feasible. There's only a certain number of companies that do this type of work in the state of California and in Oregon. And it would be very difficult to have them all retrofitted by that timeline. And I think that really should be looked into, find out who's doing the work and what their backlog would be. I mean, at some sites you're talking about, breaking the concrete and putting these vapor recovery lines next to, the existing lines. And, you're talking about shutting stations down and, basically while that work's being done, they're shut down for 2 weeks to either put, a Healy system in or, the balance system in.
And so you're referring to the July 1st, 2025 date, correct?
Yes. Yeah. To me, there's so many stations. I don't know how that would even be feasible. There's probably a handful of companies that do that type of work. I don't know if anybody else has weighed in on that one or not. I'm just looking at it just straight right now. I don't know how that could even be possible. It could slowly be done, but that would be my input there.
So is there a future date or a phased approach that you think makes the most sense as an alternative?
Oh, great question. Okay, so in that Portland area, it's possible that, you could start there and then work outward from there. And, some of the rural areas, mobilizing crews to do that type of work would be very difficult. And that would, say for one site in the mountains in Oregon, they could do 3 more somewhere else, just the mobilization part of it. I hadn't really thought about it until just now. I don't think there's more than 6 companies in the whole state that even do this work. This could be a huge issue, actually.
No, I appreciate the feedback.
Yeah.
I broke down kind of where we were hoping for specific comments or input into a couple different slides here. And this first one is on timing. So for anybody else who has a question, feedback, just like what Bascom shared, if you have anything on timing, here's a couple of concepts on the slide to spur some thoughts, but feel free to raise your hand, and Farah, if you can call on people if you see the hand up. That's all of this for timing. Let's hear it all.
Yeah, we'll do. I don't see any other hands raised for now, but if I miss you, please feel free to unmute yourself and talk. I do see Lisa right now, so let me just make sure you have access to be unmuted. Hold on.
Kelly.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. My question, it's actually not on this slide, but it had to do with the variances or whatever for filling airplanes, that certain requirements were only in the areas of Medford and was it Clackamas that had AQMI designation for rules that would apply when fueling an airplane. I was wondering if you could explain a little more about that and why large airports such as the one in Eugene or Salem wouldn't be included.
Has everything to do with the gasoline dispensing facility, lady.
I'm
It's,
sorry, somebody answering?
I think it was just interference. And
Oh,
the
okay.
part I'm talking about is page 10, section 10 of the rules that had the strikeouts.
Yes, let me pull up I think it's the definition of gasoline dispensing facility. So yeah, so we have the dispensing stationary facility, dispensing gasoline into the fuel tank of an airplane is not unless they're in Clackamas, Multnomah, or Washington County, the Medford Ashland AQMA, that maintenance area, the Salem Kaiser area. And your question is why the Eugene Airport would be excluded from that. And I think the straightforward answer is Lane County is governed not by DEQ's air quality program, but by Lane Regional Air Protection Agency. And so if our governing body was to adopt these rules, Lane County would need to implement rules that do the same thing or are more stringent. And so I would imagine they would take these on, and if they were going to add their airport to being subject to this, then that's what they would do. I will dig into that further. I wonder if there's an implication to us adding the Eugene Airport to our rules, if that makes a difference with our government relationship with Lane Regional Air.
Yes, thank you for that. I would imagine that is what you said is true. And yeah, it does take them a while to ramp up to do their own rule adoptions, but it would be great if you were able to speak to them about it and see if they can match your timeline because of these dates and how quickly they're coming up. But so is that true again with GDFs? That Lane County, no GDF in Lane County will have to comply with these rules?
No, so these rules would apply to the state implementation of air quality rules and requirements in the Lane County area are under the jurisdiction of Lane Regional. So you will see in a lot of our rules, let me see if I can pull one up real quick. Okay, here's an example. So in a lot of our rules, we have a delegation of authority where our governing body, the Environmental Quality Commission, has adopted a rule that says that LRAP is designated by our governing body to implement these rules in Lane County. So this would continue to exist in Division 244, which would mean LRAPA is designated to implement these rules as they're adopted in Lane County. So they're, Beth introduced herself earlier. She's reviewed on behalf of Lane County, and they're involved in our rulemaking process to the extent possible. So I think implementation is a consideration, but we're working together so that implementation in Lane County makes sense.
Okay.
But yeah, the rules apply, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Well, actually, so maybe just a clarification, the rules have to be adopted and then they would apply in Lane County? They'd have to be adopted by LRAPA and then they would apply to both GDFs and airports? Airport refueling? Right?
No, as soon as DEQ approves them, we have to implement them here in LRAPA.
Thank you so much, Beth. So again, then I return to my original question, why not add Eugene Airport to the rules so that all of the adoptions and implementations can happen together at the same time?
The reason for that is because we're not in onus zone non-attainment. Is one of the reasons, and we're not worried about it per se. So that's why our airport has not been considered. Doesn't mean we wouldn't be willing to look at that if we were to adopt these rules and put them into our regulations and add anything that's more strict than what DEQ has.
Yeah, that's a good point. The GDF rules as they were written and the stage 2 rules that were in Division 242, they had clear ties to our national ambient air quality standards. We have specific areas of the state that we had pollutants of concern. The Portland area was one of them for ozone. So we have specific rules that address VOC emissions from VOC sources. And you can see the links to that where it talks about the airports being in those specified areas that had VOC concerns. And then the previous rules that had a tank capacity of X gallons had to install equipment, even if they didn't need a permit or anything else. That was also a tie to the maintenance areas around the state. I'll definitely reach out to Beth and LaRapa a little bit after this RAC. We'll talk about the Eugene Airport specifically and talk about that a little bit. Lisa, thanks for bringing it up.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I believe that, that the previous designations of AQMI areas is in the past, and we all know that our issues with climate and its impact on air quality continue to exacerbate, and that Eugene Airport continues to grow, as does the population here. And so I think that it's would be a great show of foresight to include Eugene and not wait until a problem arises, which would probably happen in the near future anyway, considering the growth and the air quality problems we currently face.
Sure. Yep.
Bascom, did you have another question? I see your hand raised again. Or is that
or still
a relic from before?
That was the previous one. I'm actually right now communicating with someone on the exact number of companies that could do this type of work. And I'm hoping to get an answer in the next few minutes. So if I do, would you mind me coming back to that?
No, please raise your hand if you get it. Absolutely.
Okay, now I'm trying to unraise my hand.
Okay. Along those same lines, and I guess, Bascom, if you get that intel, that's relevant here, but the stage 1 sites are our current rules establish that if you increase your throughput at a facility, you cross some threshold that requires different equipment or new equipment, it gives you a 3-year period to install that equipment. And these proposed rules reduce that down to 2 years. So the thought being that since our throughput requirements trigger based on a 12-month period, any given month, looking at the previous 11 months, you can see what your throughput is. And hopefully by the time somebody has an exceedance, you've already started some of the planning to install additional equipment, and a 2-year period would be sufficient. But open to feedback on that if it's not. And I think, like I said, Bascom's answer on how many facilities or companies can do this work is probably relevant here.
I've seen throughput dramatically increase with a rebrand and a strategy of how they do their business. I've seen sites go from 50 to 250,000 gallons a month. So it's possible that could happen. Hadn't really thought about it until just now.
Any other input, questions, comments? Again, we would love comments and questions.
Well, I would say this, if you do a study on, there are certain states that have gone to stage 2 vapor. There's actually a small handful of states that have figured out that it wasn't what they thought. For instance, New York, they took it out. Are you familiar with that situation?
I'm not specifically aware of what happened in New York, no.
Yeah, so there's a lot, all the vehicles actually have vapor recovery now. anything built after 1990, has a built-in charcoal filter. So is there data
Right.
that you're looking at that they've measured, some level of benzene that's escaping into the air or something? I've been trying to find that information. Like how would you even come to the conclusion that this is something that is a pressing issue?
Yeah, so we've looked at the fleet data available from DMV, and then the number of stations that we have, and that was the last RAC meeting. We talked about which stations were stage 2, or which stage 2 stations were ORVR compatible versus incompatible.
Good.
So the ones that have vacuum assist, that just have a motor that turns on while fuel is being dispensed and don't turn on or off based on the vehicle's ORVR system, those ones can cause excess emissions and cause the releases, as the ORVR system and the vacuum assist system at the dispenser more or less fight over that fuel or the vapor. So the point of our rulemaking here was to address those incompatible stations. And so that's kind of the universe where we're working. I think it was about half and half, 150 give or take of compatible and incompatible. And so in the proposed rules, we have compatible stage 2 systems. They're allowed to just keep doing what they're doing, those balance sites, or if they have the enhanced dispenser, I think I've seen a couple of those. They're not very common from what I can tell. If it senses ORVR and doesn't pull the vapors, then all those compatible systems can just keep doing what they're doing.
Is there any state program possibly in place, or has this subject even been brought up on the previous 2 meetings I missed, about the cost and who pays for it? Is this is the burden put on the retailer? That would be the question.
So yes, the last RAC meeting had the control technology options, the estimated costs associated with each, and the VOC reductions associated with that cost. And that's part of how we ended up with that million threshold for EVR and enhanced conventional nozzles. But more specifically, we would address most of that during the next meeting in September to talk about the fiscal. This Rules Advisory Committee will become the fiscal. We'll talk about the fiscal impact in more detail. But the cost of compliance would fall to the owner or operator that is subject to the rules. Yeah.
Okay, so I would do this for everyone. I'm going to find out like an average cost, and I'll report back at that next meeting.
Yeah, we have specifically asked for that information throughout. So if you have cost estimates that are as accurate as possible for any given scenario, I'd love to review it.
Oh, that'd be great. Okay, I appreciate it.
Yeah, you can send us that ahead of time too. So anytime you have that, just send it to us.
Okay.
I see Dave's hand up, and I'm not sure, Dan, how we're doing it in time, but it's 2, and maybe Dave's would be the last question we take for a little while, or I'll let you
so yeah,
call on that.
Yeah, go ahead, Dave. The next couple slides are all just the different concepts that I've covered, and then asking for feedback on these specific things, and then we move to general open discussion. So if you guys have something pointed you want to jump into, I can jump to the next slide if it's appropriate, or we can just roll with questions and discussion. So go ahead, Dave.
No, Dan, it was just like a point of order, getting the data question. Farah, I didn't receive your email. I didn't have anything in my junk folder. Should I have our IS people contact you to see what the deal is?
Oh yeah, that's interesting. I did check, and you were on the list. So
and I've received your other emails too, but I just didn't get one today, and I didn't get one with the rules. So interesting.
Oh, interesting. We did open the chat, and the rules are in the chat, so you can go to the rules there. I'll repaste them into the chat. But have a look there.
But they're readily available on your website, right? Right, Farah?
Yes.
The
and I
proposed
just I just pasted them into the chat. Yep.
That's probably the easiest way to find them anyway. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So let me
Sorry,
jump to the next
Dan,
one.
I do see
Yeah.
someone else has their hand raised, but hold on, I
Oh, yeah,
can't
good.
quite see who it is.
Looks like it's Patty. Go ahead, Patty.
Patty, yeah.
And Patty, you're on mute if you're chatting away already. And then Farah, do we know if she has the ability to unmute?
I have the ability to
Oh,
unmute. I
okay.
just need to look at my screen. Sorry. I'm not sure if this is a good time to ask this question, and if not, then you'll let me know when I can ask this question. Right now, DEQ has specific, let's see, a simple permit, let's see, a general permit, a simple permit, and a standard, and then I think it goes to a Title V. With the removal of stage 2 in Portland, that will lower the general permit down to approximately 17.3 throughput. As the rules are written now, how is this going to change the permitting structure, if you will, for sites that have you're putting in dripless, spitless nozzles. If a site has a back-end vapor processor, will you be looking at that to, basically it's the VOCs is what I'm talking about. Right now, it's what is it, 100 tons for someone that has a stage 2 right now. And then if you don't have stage 2, it's down to 39 tons with a emission factor of 4.56. And then the ones with stage 2, I'm going to throw that number out there for emission factor of 1.92, I think. When will we know about the different structures for the permitting for with or without stage 2, allowing back-end vapor processors? If a site, wants to put that in, I know it's not a requirement. That's not what I'm saying. But anyway, that's my question. Is this a good time to ask this, or when will this be discussed?
Good question. I I don't think this is the right time to ask the question, to be blunt. You're talking about the after the rules are passed, what the permitting situation is going to look like for plant side emission limits and emission factors and throughput limits in a permit that would be created after these rules are passed. So all of that's going to really depend on what these rules look like after they're passed. If we assume that incompatible stage 2 sites go away, there's more of a need to revise the general permits that exist for gas stations right now. So we might still need to have a stage 2 permit for the sites that are electing to keep their stage 2. We might need a third general permit for the sites that are installing EVR and or enhanced conventional nozzles. So I don't know what that looks like. There are other rule changes that have been made in the last 12 months that we would need to take into account when we redraft some of those general permits. So a lot of that would be in flux and dependent on what happens with this rulemaking. There are no rules that would prohibit somebody from installing additional control equipment like these back-end vapor processors you're talking about. But a general permit can't account for additional controls that aren't already addressed in the general permit, if that makes sense. So there's, all of our general permits, when they're issued, they also go through a public notice process. So if there was a time to say you wanted something to be included or addressed in a general permit, you could comment during the public comment period of that particular permit and say, this should be included, here's why. Yeah, but permitting would be more or less wholly separate. Sorry.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah. Good question. So the no top off, I'll just jump into this just quickly, see if you guys have any feedback. There was a House bill this year, 2426, yeah, that established that gasoline dispensing facilities can have half of their dispensers as self-serve, where the public can dispense their own fuel. And as our current rules are, and as these proposed rules are, the responsibility for compliance is on the permittee or the owner or operator of that facility. So we've talked a little bit about how that might change, but it's a bit tricky. So I'm open to feedback from the RAC on how that might need to be changed or how it should be changed is one of the things here. And then our definitions of existing versus new and monthly throughput being an average, it's a little funky with monthly throughput not being just any given month, but I just wanted to put that on the slide and see if anybody had particular comments.
I'm not sure if this is a comment on what you just mentioned, but we have hand raised from Seanlin. Can you unmute yourself?
Yes. So I just want to add to that. I have taken that no top off poster and shrunk it and put it on all the dispensers. But what would be helpful to me is, as a retailer, is if it also covered no, stretching hoses, no upside down hoses.
So you're saying it would be helpful if the rules specified that the equipment wasn't to be used in those alternative ways?
Yeah. So do they not to, not only do we not top off, but we don't put the nozzle in upside down. And in some cases, stretching the hoses, you can only stretch a hose if the nozzle's right side up, or else the system doesn't work. So I guess if you just said no upside down nozzles, that would cover the part of stretching the hoses. Because a lot of trucks and stuff will come in, stretch that hose across the bed of the truck, put the nozzle in upside down, and then there's no spill protection because the nozzles won't click off when they're upside down.
Great. Okay. And just for my information, you're on the RAC on behalf of Safeway, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Do you happen to have any information that you could share with the EQ that explicitly documents like the nozzle being upside down does not let the vapor recovery system do what it's supposed to do, or anything similar?
Yes. Yes. Do you want me to
Okay.
email that to you?
Absolutely. That would be wonderful. I appreciate that.
Okay.
And then for the definitions in particular, this was just kind of a ballpark as well. So we figure if we're going to the EQC for proposed adoption in January, if the rules are adopted, that would give facilities a 6-month window going into July 1st, and at which point they could technically still be an existing site and not be subject to maybe the enhanced vapor recovery or what have you. So whether that's too lenient or whether that's too stringent, if anybody has feedback there, ready to hear that as well. I didn't see any hands pop up, so let's just move to the next one here would be alternative controls. So any question about alternative controls, things that should be included in the rules? If there are alternatives that should be allowed, considerations for how DEQ should or would review and or approve those things. If anybody has knowledge about the stage 1 EVR systems that are linked in the attachments to the rules that would be approved, can you mix and match those systems? Is there any issue with that? Yeah, I'll just pause there, I guess.
I don't see any questions for now, but
Okay.
We'll let you
And
know.
then last but not least, there's 3 topics on this slide. Frequency or applicability of the testing, if any of that was unclear, ambiguous, should be clarified. If there's other things that should be reported or things that shouldn't be reported, frequency of reporting, and then general rule organization. Did everything make sense? Was it too convoluted? Was the GDF 1 through 5 not as clear as I intended it to be? Anything of that nature? Also open to hear any feedback. And just to clarify, if we hadn't said explicitly, we want to hear any feedback. If there's something that you guys want to dig into more after this RAC, and then give us something in writing that says, hey, I thought more about this testing, reporting, alternatives, whatever, and here are my thoughts, absolutely please do that. It doesn't have to be right here in the moment. We want to consider everything that you guys have to give us on this rulemaking effort. Okay, don't see any hands there. So this is, I mean, now we just have a chunk of time dedicated for other things that you guys might want to either return to if you want to look at a specific part of the rules and talk about it, or if there are any things that you want to flag in particular that you would like to have addressed or answered for the fiscal impact meeting that will be next month. Now would be a good time to flag those as well for us.
Go ahead, Dave.
I just wanted to piggyback on what Patty said, the how the permits are affected and how throughput might change or be reduced, or those things are obviously really important to us GDF 5 people, so. Oh, and one other thing, like Bascom Grecian, he was talking about the cost of implementation. I mean, I'm sure he understands this, and you may well too, Dan, but there's different ways to decommission stage 2 systems, and some are more elaborate than others, like digging up all the vapor pipes versus capping them on both ends and things like that. So I don't know. It would probably be criminal if a station, especially owned by a lower volume throughput station, if they had to, for instance, remove all the vapor pipes that were in the ground, that would shut them down for a long time and be very costly. So that was the only thought that I had to piggyback on what Bascom said.
Yes, and I'm going to really look into this in depth about the actual cost and then, the feasibility versus that cost as opposed, going with the timelines that you've presented. And then I'm going to find out exactly how many people in each company in the state actually do this kind of work. I think there's a lot of stations that fall into that lower tiered, the 600,000 gallon station. And when I went back and looked at that slide, could you answer, is that station, the 600,000 gallon throughput station, is that the same as the 1 million gallon station on the timeline? Right? Yeah, there you go.
No. So I'm sorry, we're talking about the 600,000. So if you were somewhere else in the state, you would do it with your new or replaced tank. So you wouldn't be breaking concrete unless you're already breaking concrete.
Okay, so those folks, okay, they're okay
Yeah.
then. Okay, so.
And then the 1 million plus is the timeline.
Okay. Okay, that's the one we're really concerned with. I mean, at the moment.
Yeah.
There's a lot like that.
Yeah, unless there's substantive feedback from the RAC that there's another target or threshold that seems to make more sense. But from the last RAC, the 1 million gallon threshold seemed to be, minimizing impact to small businesses was a factor, and then getting substantive VOC reductions at this threshold seemed to be the consensus without hearing anybody that was in, vehement opposition.
Okay.
regarding the fiscal impacts, you know, the Southwest Clean Air Agency in Washington recently passed similar rules that went into effect, I believe in was that 2020, Dan? But they might have some thoughts on, you know, fiscal impacts and costs that we can bring to the next meeting.
Okay. If there's no other specific questions or comments from the RAC, I'll jump to the next one here. And we have a couple slides to, I guess, generally wrap up. But before we actually close, thank you guys for attending. Everybody, appreciate that you listening in or chiming in. Our immediate next steps are to review the feedback we've heard from the RAC today. Anything that you all can send us in the next several days. We'll have some rule revisions go on based on all this information, and then we'll reconvene on September 26th for the Fiscal Advisory Committee meeting. So right now, I would like the RAC to decide whether they would like to hear from members of the public on the call who may want to provide any feedback or input. It's a RAC decision, particularly. See Bascom with a thumbs up. So maybe I'll say, is anybody? Well, yeah, Bascom is yes. Who else on the RAC is here? Dave, would you be okay hearing from the public or?
Oh, certainly. That's sure. I mean, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. RAC, what do we have? Sean, Lynn, Carter, Elton, Patty, and Omar, I think. Is the rest of the RAC?
Yeah, Omar here. I think it'd be a good idea.
It's Patty. Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
And Sean, Lynn?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so let me pop up. So this will be public input for this rulemaking. So if you are a member of the public, however affiliated with a station, facility, or not, feel free to use the raise hand function on your screen. I think Farah said it was *6 or *5. Farah, help me here.
Yes, sorry about that. Yes, it is raise your hand by pressing *5, and then unmute yourself by pressing *6.
Okay.
So I do need to see you first by pressing *5 and then unmute by *6.
Okay.
So right now, I don't see anybody yet.
Okay, and then while anybody tries to figure out the raise hand button to provide some feedback or input, I'll just remind everybody this is not the formal public comment period. We're still drafting the rules, so any input you have would be used to update those rules. We'll have an official public comment period where we will ask for formal public comments, and DEQ would draft responses to those comments as part of the rulemaking process, and they would all be documented. So this is more of an informal time to have your input be included in the draft rulemaking. So just to clarify, but feel free to use the raise hand function if you'd like to do that. Give that another moment or two. Okay, I don't see any hands up.
Nor do I.
Okay. If you would like to provide some feedback or input in the next little bit before we actually wrap, feel free to raise your hand. We can try to accommodate. Otherwise, let's return back to this timeline slide. So if we have substantive feedback from you all, any of this input that's going to change the rules in a substantial manner. I think we might use part of next meeting to go over those changes with you in more detail and talk about them, and then we'll transition to a fiscal. The fiscal part of the meeting where we'll ask pointed questions about the fiscal impact and talk through that. We will then publish a public notice in October, November, at some point after that fiscal meeting. We'll request public comment at that time. And of course, you are all welcome, of course, to provide public comment during the open public comment period. DEQ, like I said, will draft responses to all those comments. And then we expect to go to the Environmental Quality Commission to have them vote on this rulemaking in January 2024. We don't have a proposed future effective date for these rules. And what that would mean is in January, if the EQC would vote to approve these rules, they'd be filed with the Oregon Secretary of State and more or less be effective that day or the very next day. So it's something to consider as well. And I think that's all we've got. If you wanted to write down the link to the rulemaking, if you can't find it from our webpage, or my contact information for future reference. Dave, will you shoot Farah and myself an email so we can try to figure out this email situation and why you're not receiving things from us?
Yeah, I'll email you both again. I emailed you this morning, but should I have our information technology folks email you maybe, or?
You know, I don't know. Honestly, I don't know why this would be happening, so maybe they should be involved. But if you start with an email to us, if we can all communicate back and forth. And if anybody else is that's on the RAC didn't receive a copy of those rules last week, please reach out to Farah and myself, and we'll try to get to the bottom of it. Make sure you have some materials. But you can still have feedback to us, like I said, for a little while. So if there's anything that you see in there that you want to comment on, let us know.
I can also explore for the next meeting, maybe there's a way to put a folder online that people can access so that we don't have to deal with attachments, but we can figure that out.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay.
Yeah, I
Well,
didn't want to drag. I didn't want to drag things down, Dan. I just wanted to tell you I've probably checked, I don't know, 6 or 7 times since Farah said she sent that file, and I haven't received it, so that's weird.
Now, I did get the one you sent me right during this meeting. It did not go into a spam folder or anything like that. Just so you know.
Okay. Good. Well, we know it's working for some people.
Okay. Well, Patty, go ahead.
I'm back to the permitting again. I know that this isn't the time. One of your 2 or 3 slides back, you had mentioned there that you were, keep going, maybe the next one. No, not testing, maybe it's the one before that. Vapor processors. So you're interested to find out the advantages of vapor processors. Is that what I'm understanding from that comment right there?
So yeah, in the proposed rules, we have the requirement for a facility to, like various facilities at different thresholds, right, to install either a stage 1 vapor balance system or enhanced vapor recovery and enhanced conventional nozzles, decommission stage 2. So if there is documentation on the effectiveness or control efficiency of a vapor processor as a separate standalone piece of equipment that is comparable and maybe could replace some other part of the rule that's less costly, just as efficient, something like that, be more than happy to review any of that material as one of the control options that could be in the rules.
Gotcha. Okay, so over and above, this would be just something that would be a choice a site would do. And this is not something that you're interested in during this RAC discussion. Over and above. I mean, stage 1, stage 2, dripless, spitless nozzles, low perm hoses, things like that. I understand that. But let's go back to the word green machine. and that's a back-end vapor processor. And we've had we've had a few sites that we have gone in and we put the green machine in, along with the dripless, spitless, and the low perm hoses, and it lowered the emission factor by a lot. And I don't know if that's something that you want us to provide to you for this RAC discussion or not.
I guess the short answer is yes. And so
Okay.
I guess I would ask for that to be accompanied by how you think that would fit in with the rules. Like if a facility is at the 120,000 threshold and they have to install stage 1, is this something that they could use instead of installing a vapor balance system that would capture the same amount of vapors and potentially be cheaper than, breaking concrete to install those lines, or buying a new tank that has to be have a dual point vapor return exit? So I don't know exactly how this specific component would work or could fit into the rules. Maybe it's an alternative as an option for a facility that has control requirements. So I would look for you to provide that kind of insight for how it could be used for how it could be used.
Understood. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh yeah, go ahead, Tom.
Hi there, thanks. Yeah, this is kind of a what's next question. So what I heard was the discussion just now of looking for feedback on alternatives. I heard a concern about the cost implications. I heard a concern about the timing, and I heard a concern about the impact on permitting. Given that you get feedback on all these things, what's the next step in addressing these requests or concerns? Because I know we're going into a financial workshop down the road, but I was just wondering.
Yeah, so some of this will require discussion and review internally with some DEQ folks. Some of it's going to be material that the RAC members are going to provide to us after the meeting. We might have to meet to discuss those materials in a little more detail, what was submitted, but we'll revise the rules in some capacity. And then that's part of why the September meeting I listed as a RAC/fiscal meeting, just because there could be changes that we want to discuss in more detail based on what's been presented and provided. And then we can talk fiscal. We have to do the fiscal component as part of the rulemaking process, but if there are changes that we're considering or have made to the draft rules, then we would talk through those at the first part of the meeting.
Got it. Got it. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. And just from a transparency perspective, if there's something that somebody on the RAC has brought up that you think warrants more consideration that hasn't been that we haven't answered sufficiently, I would just point everybody to the public comment period and just submit all the public comments that you can. We want to consider as much as we can to get these rules in a place where implementation can happen, that we're getting the emissions reductions we're looking for, we're addressing the goals of the rulemaking that we're trying to accomplish. So yeah, I'll just leave it with that. Okay. And before we depart, let's give 5 seconds to anybody else who wants to raise a hand. Okay. Seeing none, I will thank you all for your time. Farrah, if you can go ahead and stop the recording. We will, if you don't already have the fiscal meeting, you'll see that invite here shortly. And please send us whatever materials you came up with that we talked about. Feel free to reach out to myself or Farrah, and let's make these rules better. Thank you all for your time. I appreciate it.